The galaxy was ruled by 12 ancient species until humanity did something unthinkable. We said no. No to their laws. No to their threats. No to giving up the worlds we built with our own hands. And what happened next? The entire galaxy started to fall in love with the rebellion. Captain Arlen Voss stood firm on the command deck of the Terran warship Resolute, eyes locked on the shimmering projection that hovered in the air before him. A ghostly figure flickered within, a tall being, its 4 elongated limbs and violet hide pulsing with faint bioluminescence. Its voice was icy, mechanical, and devoid of empathy. Inhabitants of Sol's third world, the creature declared, you have 30 cycles to respond to our ultimatum. Return the triad of planets seized from our dominion. Cease expansion beyond assigned sectors. Submit to the dominion of the Celestial Accord. Decline, and your fleets will burn. Your settlements will be claimed by force. The transmission blinked out. Silence fell over the bridge. Every officer aboard had the same grim expression etched across their face. The Celestial Accord, an alliance forged by 12 alien empires, had governed the stars since before humanity discovered fire. Not once in known history had anyone defied them. Dr. Alara Miles approached Arlen quietly. Her specialty was xenorelations, and her face was pale. We need to discuss this in private, she murmured. Arlen gave a curt nod, and they withdrew to his chambers. Alara unfolded her holoslate and began to speak. They're not bluffing this time. This isn't a warning. It's a final judgment. Explain, Arlen said, voice low. She brought up a series of alien profiles. The Accord is made up of a dozen species. The ones who sent the transmission call themselves the Sirvathi, arrogant, aggressive, and the de facto rulers of the Accord for half a millennium. She tapped to another image. These are the Felkaran. Imagine saber-toothed tigers that stand upright and speak 10 languages. They don't like the Sirvathi, but they still obey Accord law. And the rest? Arlen asked. Some are weaponsmiths, others engineers. A few are telepathic tacticians, but all of them bow to the same banner. None have ever challenged the Accord's command. Arlen pressed his fingers to his temple. And now they demand we hand over 3 entire worlds. Yes, she confirmed. Frontier spheres, Zephyrich, Titan's Rest, and Elysium Fold. Nearly 2 million human souls live there now. The Accord says other species claimed them long ago, she added. But when we arrived, they were uninhabited, Arlen muttered. Alara nodded solemnly. That's the heart of the dispute. The Accord doesn't care. Their doctrine says a claimed world is sovereign territory forever. Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Elias Rourke faced the same storm. He sat surrounded by military and political advisors in the underground war room beneath the Capitol Dome, the alien ultimatum replaying on the wall-size screen. General Ransom Dole slammed his palm against the table. We cannot surrender those colonies, he growled. Millions of citizens live there now. They've built lives, homes, harvest fields, entire cities from dust. Minister Rhea Halden frowned, arms crossed. But if we stand against the Accord, we're doomed. They have warships from a dozen empires. We've got human-built fleets, and not enough of them. How many vessels are we talking about? President Elias Rourke asked. General Thorne, Vex, flipped through his encrypted tablet. Our intelligence estimates 3,000 advanced destroyers. We've got 800, smaller, weaker, outgunned on every front. Rhea leaned forward, voice urgent. We have to open talks. Maybe they'll let us keep one system. Or perhaps we could broker a lesser agreement. What kind of arrangement? Rourke asked warily. A secondary alliance, she replied. We accept oversight. Follow their interstellar codes. They might allow us to retain partial sovereignty. It's a compromise, but better than extinction. The general slammed his fist against the steel briefing table. Secondary alliance? That's a leash. We'd be their vassals. They dictate our future, limit our expansion. No free Terran would accept that. The president sat in silence, gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. What if we don't concede anything? Both advisors looked stunned. Rhea blinked. Excuse me, sir? No bargaining. No submission. No acknowledgement of their rule. Just silence. A slow grin spread across General Vex's face. That's bold. Reckless too. But I like it. It guarantees a fight, though. Maybe, Rourke said quietly. Or maybe it changes the game. Has anyone ever refused to even respond to the accord? Rhea tapped into the historical archives on her holopad. Negative, sir. Every civilization that encountered the accord either assimilated or vanished. None ignored them entirely. Meanwhile, aboard the Resolute, Captain Arlen Voss gathered his officers in the operations chamber. "What's our course of action?" he asked, eyes sweeping across the room. Lieutenant Dario Kess spoke up first. "Sir, the Accord believes they rule the cosmos. Perhaps it's time someone challenged that fantasy." Chief Engineer Mira Solis nodded. "Our settlers won't abandon their homes without a fight. To them, those colonies are Earth now." Dr. Alara Miles shifted uneasily. "But a conflict will cost lives, human and alien alike, blood across the stars." "Unless," Arlen said, "we refuse to play their game." "What game?" Mira asked. He stood, pacing. "Their control depends on belief. If everyone thinks they're the supreme power, then they are. But what if we simply stop believing?" Dario's eyes lit up. "Ignore them? Pretend their authority is meaningless?" "Exactly. No attacks. No treaties. No responses. Just continue our lives, as if they're nothing more than another belligerent faction." Alara raised an eyebrow. "No civilization has tried that. The consequences are unknown." "Then it's time we find out," Arlen said with quiet conviction. "I'll send my formal recommendation to Terra Command. Full rejection of the Accord's demands. No dialogue. No submission. No fear." 2 rotations later, President Rourke made his choice. He summoned his cabinet. Back in the underground war chamber, President Rourke stood tall before the round table of Earth's last decision-makers. "My decision is final," he said. "We're about to do something unprecedented in the history of intelligent life. We will tell the Celestial Accord that humanity does not acknowledge their dominion. No negotiations. No threats. No bending the knee. Unless they strike us first, we'll pretend they don't exist." General Vex gave a wolfish grin. "This might be the boldest act in our species' story, or the most reckless." Minister Halden looked ghost-white. "Sir, this could ignite a war that annihilates every last human." Rourke gave a slow nod. "Perhaps. But surrendering our future is worse than death. Better to fall as sovereign beings than live as controlled cattle." He turned to the comms officer. "Transmit the message. Make it clear. Terra refuses their demands. No further dialogue." The transmission was sent within hours. Bare. Defiant. Clear. Human civilization does not acknowledge the rule of the Celestial Accord. Your demands are denied. Cease all further communications. In all their centuries of dominance, the Accord had never encountered such audacity. Not once had any race dared to utter a plain, defiant no, but that word, one syllable, would ripple through the stars like a tectonic fracture. High Emissary Zayla Thren of the Seer-Vathi Alliance glared at the human reply for the 10th time. Her 4 violet limbs trembled with seething rage. In over 3 centuries of life, never had she witnessed this kind of defiance. No species had ever refused to even speak with the Accord. She summoned an emergency convergence of all 12 Accord civilizations. The Grand Hall of Viral Prime, seat of galactic governance, erupted in a frenzy unseen for generations. Representatives shouted in dozens of tongues, echoing through marble columns carved from asteroid bones. "Silence," roared Chancellor Zextella. We must reach consensus on the human anomaly. The Felkaran envoy, a towering feline named Gralek, rose with fur on edge. They've disgraced us all. Launch the fleets. Reduce their systems to ash. But Velna, the crystalline envoy of the Vorth, shimmered as she replied. Her voice sounded like breaking glass caught in wind. Wait. Has anyone asked why they chose silence? This isn't normal. No species rejects diplomacy without cause. Zextella narrowed her multiple eyes. Motives are irrelevant. They've breached the Accord's sacred authority. If we hesitate, others may question our supremacy. Far beyond the political storm, aboard the stealth frigate Ecliptic Dawn, Commander Darian Knox watched the fracturing council feed from his command screen, hands clasped behind his back. Commander Dario Kess had docked at Orion's Cradle, the galaxy's largest free market hub, suspended in neutral territory. The colossal station teemed with life forms from across known space, glittering scales, furred beasts, plasma-formed entities, all flowing through its shining corridors like an endless river of color and motion. As he made his way through the main atrium, Dario noticed something unsettling, shouting. Alien merchants were yelling across vendor stalls. Some accused humans of defiance. Others defended them with surprising passion. The unity once felt here had started to fracture. He paused outside the Dustdrift Lounge, a place known for its cross-species harmony. Today, that harmony had cracked. The Seer Vathi, cold and regal, occupied one side of the bar. The towering Felkarn clustered on the other, tails flicking with restrained aggression. The rest looked on, silent and anxious. Behind the counter stood Texel, a six-limbed barkeep with skin like liquid stone. Commander Kess, Texel said in a hushed tone. The room's been boiling for hours. Half the patrons think your kind are revolutionaries. The rest think you've gone mad. What do you believe? Dario asked, voice even. Texel polished a curved glass with two arms, while the other for served drinks and scanned ID chips. I believe your people reminded the galaxy that saying no is still an option. The Accord's been barking orders so long, everyone forgot they had a voice. Dario sipped his drink, letting the background noise drift in. At one table, three aliens argued fiercely. The Terrans are deluded, growled a violet-skinned Seer Vathi merchant. They'll be wiped out. Maybe, replied a rodent-like creature with glowing whiskers, species unknown to Dario. But maybe not. What if they're the spark that lights something bigger? A Felkarn warrior laughed, a deep, guttural rumble. Please. They have fewer warships than my clan alone. This will be over in weeks. The smaller alien's eyes narrowed, voice low. Victory isn't always measured in steel and size. Sometimes it's measured in will. Dario set down his glass and stepped back into the corridor. What he saw next made him stop cold. Dozens of aliens, diverse in form and species, were gathered peacefully, holding signs lit with shifting characters. Support Terran freedom, translated across a dozen languages. The station's silence trembled with meaning. Far away, on the outer colony Reedridge Prime, panic gripped the hearts of human settlers. Governor Mira Solis stood in her cluttered office, surrounded by frightened voices. Farmers, engineers, miners, all desperate for answers. Governor, an old rancher asked, voice shaking, are we about to be evacuated? Mira stood tall, eyes blazing. No one's being forced off their land. Earth has taken its stand. We do not recognize the Accord's jurisdiction here. Another colonist stepped forward. But if they invade? Before Mira could respond, Admiral Ronan Vale entered, his presence heavy as iron. He commanded all defense forces in this quadrant. Then we stand our ground, he said matter-of-fact. Gasps swept the room. The Admiral added, voice calm but steady. I don't believe it'll come to that. The Accord's house isn't as solid as it used to be. Mira narrowed her gaze. What kind of fractures? Our informants report fractures within the concordant species ranks. Some factions clamor for immediate retaliation. Others urge patience, hoping to observe humanity's intent. And a few, surprisingly, have begun questioning the very foundation of the Concord itself. In the great chamber of Neralax Prime, discord festered like a wound. The 12 dominant civilizations of the Concordant had divided into clashing blocks. The Velsher Dominion and its aggressive allies demanded instant conflict. The Dracari clans argued for measured response, to reinforce and strike with precision. Then came the voices no one had expected. Soft, unnerving questions echoed from the unlikeliest corners. Who gave us the right to dictate another race's destiny? His scrawl, the delegate of the insectoid Zalari. Lady Zyrexa, High Speaker for the Velsher, exploded in rage. Because it is the law of balance. Concordant authority preserves galactic peace. But what if not every species wants our so-called peace? Countered Utrin, a smooth-skinned philosopher from the gentle Lurian order. The Terrans settled abandoned systems. No blood was spilled. From the stone benches, Gryshak of the war-born Karnath horde snarled. If we permit humans to defy us, what's next? Will every primitive culture shatter the laws? Valira, a crystalline envoy, let out a musical tone of disapproval. Perhaps it's time to ask when we began believing we own every star. The chamber descended into uproar. Friendships forged over centuries broke apart in a single night of bitter yelling. Old allies accused each other of weakness. Loyalty cracked. Chief Arbiter Zirthale pounded her staff to restore calm, but the hall no longer listened. 3 cycles later, the unthinkable occurred. The Trinari Ascendancy formally withdrew its endorsement of armed retaliation. Their counselor claimed their people required more time to evaluate the human stance. Within hours, 2 more factions declared noncompliance. The delicate Thalen kin, pacifists by nature, refused to participate in hostilities. The aquatic Vornexus swarm adopted full neutrality. Zirthale sent frantic dispatches across the sector. Her tone was clear. Fracture now, and the Concordant itself may crumble. But her desperation backfired. The Dracari clans began to reconsider why they always bowed to Velsher supremacy. The smaller species whispered doubts. Did they need the Concordant to survive? Had it become a cage rather than a shield? Meanwhile, deep beneath the White Spire in New Earth Command, President Elias Rourke reviewed real-time intelligence. General Thorn Vex stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with astonishment. Sir, it's unraveling faster than anticipated. The Velsher-led coalition is splintering. 3 have withdrawn from combat plans. 2 more have questioned the entire structure. The Dracari are challenging Velsher leadership openly. A smile crept onto the president's face. By simply refusing to participate, we've made them examine their own house. And what they see terrifies them. General Vex asked, "What now, Mr. President?" Rourke leaned back, calm as a winter tide. "We hold the line. Do nothing. Offer no response. Let their own fears do the rest." As humanity continued establishing its frontier outposts, Earth offered no apologies, no updates. Let them wrestle with their own chaos, was the unspoken answer. Meanwhile, aboard Ark Spire Station, Commander Ronan Vale sifted through encrypted broadcasts from every quadrant. The news told a strange story, unrest simmering on distant worlds. Riots had erupted in once loyal planets. Protesters, alien voices once silenced, now demanded liberation from Concordant domination. Some factions even cried out for the total dismantling of the Concord itself. The old bartender that's leathery and ancient wandered over to Ronan's table and refilled his glass. "Commander," Vez said, voice gravelly, "I've been stewing on what your species just did." Ronan didn't look up. "Yeah. Maybe saying no isn't the hard part," Vez mused. "Maybe the real challenge is daring to believe you can." Ronan gave a slow nod. "You Terrans reminded the galaxy of something vital, that the Concordant's grip only holds because people believe it should." Vaz leaned in. "Strip away that belief, and all you're left with are 12 empires pretending they still matter." As Ronan prepared to leave the station, something new caught his eye. The crowd of protesters outside had grown. Now, beings from 8 different civilizations stood side by side, holding digital signs that flickered with messages of sovereignty and rebellion. For over 1,000 cycles, the Concordant had ruled the stars uncontested. But now, in the space of 7 short days, Earth's simple refusal had triggered a movement that could break a millennium of control. The Concordant was learning a harsh truth. Empires built on fear and habit are far more brittle than they appear. And this was just the prologue. 6 cycles later, the galaxy looked nothing like it had. Aboard the scout vessel Vanguard, Captain Mirachin stared at the impossible through her observation deck. 2 armadas, colossal and grim, hovered in the Centauri expanse, their weapons armed, their positions locked. To port, the violet juggernauts of the Zealer Imperium. To starboard, the obsidian lances of the Karnathi Pact. They had once shared treaties, trade, and conquest. Now, they were seconds from civil war. "Captain," said her comms officer, sweat on his brow. Open chatter from both sides. They're serious. "It's going down." Mira exhaled slowly. These factions were allies 6 months ago. Then, without warning, the heavens ignited. The Zealer fired first. Arcs of glowing amethyst energy streaked across space, tearing into the hulls of Karnathi ships. The feline-like warriors answered with blinding streams of white-hot plasma. Hulls cracked, ships split. Flames burst from the vacuum like ghostly suns. Mira watched, stunned, as 1,000 years of alliance shattered into fire and ruin. "Get us out of range," she ordered, "and send word to Earth. The Concordant has begun devouring itself." On Earth, Dr. Orion Kale no longer held the title of ambassador to the Concord. That position meant nothing now. What use was a diplomat when you refused to speak to the regime you once negotiated with? Instead, Kale had become humanity's quiet eye on the shifting tides of galactic power. In his high-security observatory, he scrolled through report after report, each one more chaotic than the last. And the storm was just beginning. Things had grown far darker than anyone dared to predict. The celestial concord was no longer merely squabbling. It was openly at war with itself. The Felkor Dominion had officially denounced the Sir-Vathi Directorate's leadership. In a coded transmission to President Elias Rourke, Commander Alex Wren spoke with urgency. "They're accusing the Sir-Vathi of centuries of corruption and abuse. It's all unraveling." Rourke looked like a man carrying the weight of a crumbling galaxy. His face, lined and exhausted, had aged more in 6 months than most men did in 6 years. "What about the other factions?" he asked. "It's chaos," Alex answered. "The crystalline Volari have declared absolute neutrality. They won't assist anyone. The Zephyr clans want to break away completely, and 3 smaller civilizations have already abandoned the Concord entirely." "And the humans?" Rourke asked, a flicker of hope behind his tired eyes. For the first time in weeks, Alex smiled. "That's the part you'll like. While the Concord collapses, we've accelerated. 5 new settlements in just 6 cycles. No one's challenging us. They're too busy tearing each other apart." Meanwhile, on the human outpost Iron Mesa, Governor Mira Solis faced a very different kind of crisis. Waves of alien refugees were arriving at her doorstep, desperate, exhausted, and pleading for safety. "Governor," said her assistant, "we have another docking request. Civilian transport. Zephyr again. Families on board." Mira stood at the window of her control tower. Beyond the glass, she could see 3 foreign ships that had landed just this week. All carried beings fleeing the same firestorm spreading through Concord space. "Grant them permission," she said, "but make sure they understand. This colony honors no external claim to governance. Here, we treat everyone with respect, but we bow to no empire." The Zephyr vessel touched down with a gentle hum. Mira left her tower and walked to meet the arrivals herself. They stepped out, weary and wide-eyed. Their leader, A female named Rixale moved cautiously forward. "Governor Solis, we request sanctuary," she said. "Our homeworld is under siege. Seer Vathi forces accuse us of betrayal, all because we asked to leave the Concord." Mira met her gaze. "You're welcome here. Follow our rules, honor our independence, and you may stay as long as you need. But tell me, why seek out humans? There are other worlds." Rixale's multifaceted eyes shimmered. "Because you did the impossible. You said no and meant it. You proved their power was illusion. The rest of us just didn't see it until now." Across the stars, the conflict deepened. The Seer Vathi were splitting their war fleets, half committed to crushing the Felkor rebellion, the other half tasked with suppressing uprisings within their own dominion. The Felkor, while fierce, struggled to maintain order at home and wage war abroad. But then, a shockwave no one predicted. From the oceans of the deep-water world Mardarin, the aquatic species known as the Tiderii broke centuries of silence. They made a simple declaration, not loyalty to any side, but war on both. They would no longer kneel. They would fight for their own freedom. And somewhere in orbit above that rising tide, Admiral Cale Thorne watched the stars begin to burn. General Kalen Rourke observed the unfolding chaos from the command deck of the dreadnought Ironwake, stationed in the Zephyr Reach sector. His communications officer approached with a grim update. "Sir, the Tarnathi just launched simultaneous strikes on 3 concordant garrisons. They've declared full autonomy, no more external control." Kalen let out a low whistle. "How many races are rising now?" 7 confirmed. "And sir, it's escalating by the hour." Kalen leaned back in his chair, staring at the storm of stars outside. "You know the wildest part? We're not even fighting. We haven't lifted a weapon. We just keep pushing our borders outward while the rest of the galaxy self-destructs around us." Meanwhile, on Virilon, capital of the fractured Concordant, Ambassador Zavrix Elon stood in the once proud Unity Hall, desperately attempting to rally the crumbling council. Where 12 had once ruled, only 6 remained. "We must stand together against the Terran danger," she cried, voice cracking under pressure. "They're the reason for this madness." Raish, reptilian delegate of the Zenthari, scoffed. "Humans didn't cause this. They simply exposed it. We all felt the rot beneath the marble. They've just proven the foundation was fear, not harmony." From a corner, the crystalline envoy, Velexin, shimmered. "They never invaded, never demanded. They simply refused to kneel. And if that tiny act shattered our order, perhaps it was time for it to break." Zavrix's face burned with fury. "You'd abandon a millennia of interstellar stability?" Raish gave a cold, bitter smile. "Stability? That's what you call it? No, Ambassador. We've been gilded prisoners, pretending chains were jewelry. The Terrans reminded us what it feels like to breathe without permission." The debate collapsed into silence. And by morning, 3 more species had formally departed the Concordant. Only the Seer Vathi coalition and their last 2 loyalist factions remained. That same night, far across the stars, Commander Mara led a fleet into the unclaimed Valis Rift. The system shimmered with promise for golden worlds, each ripe for settlement. Half a cycle ago, Concordant warships would have blocked their entry, citing future claims for their own kind. Now, Mara's ships drifted undisturbed through the silence. "Ma'am," her navigator called out, scanning new readings. "We're picking up strange echoes from the 4th planet. Could be remnants, old structures, possibly ancient tech." Mara smiled faintly. "Then let's investigate. That's what sovereign explorers do. We don't wait for permission from broken thrones." Her ships moved into orbit, satellites unfolding like wings. At that moment, a transmission crackled in from Earth. Terran merchant vessels were reporting direct contact from alien traders, species once bound to concordant trade protocols, now offering independent deals. No middlemen, no tariffs, no declarations, just honest exchange. The old hierarchy was in freefall. A 1,000-year monopoly on commerce, communication, and diplomacy was collapsing under its own weight. And as every piece fell, more species turned toward humanity, not in fear, but in hope. The Zephyrian Enclave wanted Terran tech, specifically navigation systems and adaptive reactors. The Lunari, those soft-voiced mystics of light and rhythm, reached out for open diplomacy. And even a few daring Kathari merchants had begun quietly forging shadow deals with human traders on the outer rim of Sol. Back on Earth, President Elias Rourke once again gathered his inner circle in the subterranean command dome. The entire game had shifted since they'd rejected the Accord's ultimatum. "Sir," began General Thorne Vex, his voice sharp, "our analysts now confirm concordant military unity is gone. The Seer Vathi Corps is locked in 3 simultaneous campaigns. The Felkarn clans are losing grip on their fringe sectors. And the minor factions? They're either defecting or desperately trying to stay uninvolved." Secretary of State Rhea Halden blinked in disbelief. "All we did was ignore them, and the Accord collapsed?" Rourke nodded slowly, as if the truth itself weighed more than the world. "Their power was built on the illusion of obedience," he said. "Once we showed you could simply say no, others began to wonder why they were still kneeling." "What's the next step?" asked General Vex. "We stay our course," Rourke replied. "Offer shelter to those who need it. Trade with the honest. Settle new systems. Expand the frontier. And never, never bow to anyone claiming dominion." The great concordant, rulers of the stars for 1,000 solar cycles, was disintegrating. But in its crumbling shadow, something unexpected began to take root, a galaxy reborn. One of choice, of sovereign bonds, of new truths. And it had all begun with one unremarkable Terran word: no. 12 months after Earth's defiance echoed across the stars, the impossible became real. Aboard the cruiser New Dawn, Captain Isaac Merrick stood at the helm, orbiting a contested system near the edge of the Prithian Veil. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Commander Rixtel, envoy from the Zephyrian Enclave. And flanking them, a liquid-skinned entity known as Bluecrest, emissary of the Tadari kin. Together, they formed the first multi-species patrol fleet in recorded memory, not forged through force compliance, but through willing alliance. "Terran vessel New Dawn, this is cargo hauler Tranquil Current," a voice crackled across the comms. "Under siege by pirates. Requesting immediate aid." Merrick turned to his allies. "What's your call?" he asked. Rixtel's jewel-toned eyes pulsed with certainty. "The Lunari asked us to protect their ships. Our pack stands." Bluecrest shimmered with conviction, its voice like tides over stone. "In the age of the Concordant, they'd have asked what profit we gained. We help now because justice matters." The trio of ships turned their engines toward the signal. 3 banners, 3 histories, 1 cause. In the distance, the merchant craft glowed faintly, under attack from shadow-born raiders. It belonged to the Lunari, a gentle race, soft as starlight, who had once lived in fear. Not anymore. Petal-shaped ships drifted through the stars, living vessels from the Florellan kindred, delicate beings who bloomed with thought and light. But peace shattered when old predators emerged. The Dominarch Marauders, loyalists of the Shattered Accord, struck like vipers. "This is Commander Miles, Terran of the Unity Defense Armada." His voice rang clear over the wideband. "You are attacking a vessel under our care. Disengage immediately." Laughter echoed back. "You're not Concordant enforcers, Terran," sneered the lead raider. "You have no right to interfere." "You're correct," Miles replied calmly. "We're not Concord. We're something better. We're allies standing for one another." The response was lead and fire. The skirmish didn't last long. The coalition fleet, human vessels alongside their new allies, moved with precise harmony. Terran cruisers unleashed a wall of suppressing fire, shielding the merchant bloom ships. Meanwhile, the dart-like Valari strikers zipped between enemy hulls, crippling engines and systems with surgical strikes. The armored Drithani dreadnoughts used energy shrouds to absorb incoming blasts. In moments, the battle was over. The raiders scattered like insects under flame. "You saved us," said the soft-toned captain of the Florellan vessel, her voice like falling petals. The old regime demanded tribute for protection. "You asked for nothing." Miles offered a quiet smile. "We asked for solidarity. That's worth more than any currency." Back on Solara Prime, Ambassador Saren Holt met with envoys from 6 species seeking to align with the growing alliance, what whispers across the stars now called the Unity Compact. "We're not building an empire," she explained to the gathered delegates. "We offer cooperation, not control. Partnership, not obedience." A tall, willowy envoy named the Lin Zev, speaker for the Skydrifters, a species who floated above gas giants in cities of cloud, tilted his head. "But with no single ruler, how do you govern? How are disagreements handled?" Saren smiled. "We talk. We share. We listen. And when we can't agree, we choose peace anyway. Friendship doesn't need consensus, just respect." The idea was alien to those who had known only iron chains beneath golden laws. But it called to them a whisper of freedom never known before. Meanwhile, General Arya Lin oversaw a project once forbidden under the Concordance Doctrine, the formation of a truly mixed defense force. Human Marines trained shoulder to shoulder with the Zephyri Blade Wardens and the shielded titans of the Torvex Forge Kind. Together, they traded techniques, tech, and perspective. "Incredible General," said technician Juno Ferris, adjusting a tactical console. "Zephyri shielding methods boosted our deflectors by almost a third." "And what did they learn from us?" Arya asked. "Our diagnostics and hull restore cycles. Their cruisers now self-repair at double speed." Arya nodded, satisfaction clear. "That's real unity. Shared strength built on shared respect. No hierarchy, no superiority, just mutual growth." The Compact's influence reached farther than anyone predicted. On Aquarian, an oceanic sanctuary world, refugee colonies had been established for those escaping the endless war zones of crumbling Concord territories. Here, Dr. Kalen Rhodes, a human physician, moved through one of the flooded relief zones, tending wounds of every shape and hue. Her patients came from 12 different worlds, scorched, wounded, weary, and she asked none of them where they stood politically, only what they needed to heal. Learning alien physiology on the fly was never part of Kalensider's training. Yet here she was, sleeves rolled up, elbows deep in cross-species triage alongside Zalari medics and Lamari lifebinders, 2 of the most advanced healing orders in known space. She turned toward her newest patient, a trembling Virexi child, his azure skin scraped and his eyes wide with fear. He had fled the collapsing Concord sectors with his mother. "Doctor," he asked, voice like wind over glass, "why do you help us?" "You aren't Virexi." Kalen gave a gentle smile as she adjusted the last sensor pad on his injured arm. "Because you're in pain," she said softly. "And I can help. That's reason enough." The boy's mother, tall, elegant, with skin glowing like moonlit amethyst, had overheard the conversation. She approached, tears rising unbidden. "My people always believed we were superior," she said. "But you're kind. You help all who ask. No judgment. No conditions. I was wrong about everything." For centuries, the old Concordant Dominion thrived on a bitter doctrine: hierarchy above harmony. A pyramid of power where the oldest species ruled and the youngest obeyed. But humanity's quiet defiance had upended that order. Their Unity Compact was reshaping galactic norms, not with weapons, but with collaboration. Not everyone, of course, welcomed the new reality. On the shattered homeworld of the Virexi Prime Market, the last loyalists of the old Concord gathered for an emergency summit. Only 3 species remained faithful to the decaying regime. Ambassador Zexer Tharn looked hollow-eyed beneath his ceremonial crest. "The Terrans have poisoned the stars with foolish ideals: equality, cooperation, freedom. Now the weak defy us. Graskith of the Corthan Pride slammed his fist on the stone table. They've stolen our territories. Our colonies defect daily. But even among the diehards, cracks were forming. Perhaps, murmured Merex of the Ironborn, we should ask why so many now choose their way. Zexer turned on him, voice sharp as broken metal. You'd abandon the foundation of our supremacy? I would survive, Merex replied coldly. Adaptation is life. Fossils do not inherit the stars. Their argument was shattered by a transmission, urgent, undeniable. 3 more systems had declared independence and requested protection under the Unity Compact. Meanwhile, back on the once quiet colony of Freehold, now buzzing with diplomatic activity, Governor Rhea White faced a new kind of pressure. A year ago, her worries were irrigation grids and food shipments. Now, alien envoys flooded her council chamber, all eager to establish relations. Governor, said Valari of the Shardborn, her voice chiming like silver bells, my people wish to open a permanent embassy here. Why here? Rhea asked. Valari's crystalline face caught the sunlight. Because this is where it began. When your people refused to bow, you showed us we could refuse as well. This world means something now. It's a symbol of liberty to those across the void. Rhea exhaled, a weight falling on her shoulders. This dusty farming colony had become a beacon. Across the system, Chief Architect Daniel Foran stood inside the heart of Unity Forge 1, working on something never before attempted. A collaboration between 5 civilizations. Human Insight, Zalari Energy Matrix Engineering, Drithani Alloy Compression, Tidari Data Weaving, and Corthan Gravity Symphonics. Together, they were building something not even the Concord could have imagined. A future no species could create alone. Using oceanic surge engines and Terran quantum threading cores, he explained to President Elias Rourke via secure holocall, we're building something that will rewrite history. What exactly are you proposing? The president asked, leaning forward. Galaxy-wide instantaneous communication. No more months of waiting. Messages delivered in real time. And we're giving it freely to every Unity member. Rourke sat back, stunned. The old regime suppressed interspecies innovation. They feared what true collaboration might awaken. The engineers' eyes gleamed. They were right to be afraid. As the cycle ended, the Unity Compact had grown. One voice had become 8. The Alliance now shared not just defenses, but dreams. Scientists cross-pollinated breakthroughs. Builders co-created habitats. Traders bypassed old bureaucracy and shook hands, claw or tendril directly. Cultural rivers flowed like never before. New symphonies soared through alien skies. And shared festivals lit up worlds once isolated. But the real shift? Disputes were no longer answered with fire. They were solved with words, treaties replacing tyrants. Aboard the newly christened warship Seraphis, Captain Noema Kellis scanned peaceful skies. Where once the Accord's patrols loomed heavy, now merchant convoys hummed with life, explorers, scholars, and refugees traveling freely. Captain, her comms officer called out, receiving a distress ping from a Veltian civilian hauler. Under attack, coordinates incoming. Noema didn't flinch. All ships, break orbit and engage intercept. We help them. Even after all they've done? Yes. Because we're not like the old world. We help those in danger. Period. Her fleet pivoted, cutting through the stars with burning grace. As they surged toward the cry for help, Noema caught her reflection in the viewport, once a soldier for Earth's survival, now a guardian for a better galaxy. This wasn't a mission. It was a promise kept. The galaxy wasn't changing because of orders. It was evolving because enough people had chosen to act differently. All because, 2 years ago, humanity had said one thing, no more. Now, in the polished glass of Endeavor's bridge, humanity's largest deep-range vessel, Captain Noema Kellis once again looked beyond the map. Around her, beings from 12 species worked in seamless rhythm. At the helm, Commander Reshkal of the Marin Zephyri checked instrument alignments. Their crew had grown into a family. "Captain," Reshkal said, voice smooth and firm, "all systems go." Long-range engines prepped. Naima turned to the main star field, a region beyond even former Accord authority. "Untouched, untamed, unknown. And our mission crew?" she asked. Dr. Lysander Rohn, Unity's chief scientific envoy, smiled as he approached. Every berth filled. Researchers from every race aboard, plus a few brave Veltian defectors who walked away from tyranny, all eager to see what lies ahead. Naima gave a nod, heart steady. The Endeavor wasn't just a ship, it was a statement. A floating sanctuary of chosen kin, built not for conquest, but discovery. They weren't explorers because someone commanded it. They explored because they believed in the wonder still waiting out there. The age of supremacy had finally ended. No more dominions. No more decrees. Just uncharted stars beyond the maps. And back on Earth, President Elias Rourke stood before the podium, not to command fleets, but to witness a milestone no one had ever dared dream. Today marked the formal dismantling of the Celestial Accord. The final 3 factions had withdrawn peacefully. No force, no demands. They simply left it behind. "Mr. President," said General Thorn Vex, entering the chamber with a hard drive in hand. "Confirmation just came in from Kelthra Prime. Ambassador Jidran Velos has issued a complete surrender. The Hajani Directorate has officially disbanded." Rourke sat down slowly, processing the moment. "And their people?" "Scattered," Vex replied. "Some are seeking asylum in Unity space. Others want a fresh beginning on unsettled planets. A few have even submitted requests to join the Compact as equal members." The door opened. In stepped Rhea Halden, now Secretary of Interworld Relations, holding a sleek datapad. Her face beamed. "Sir," she said, "the Hajani refugees have proposed something incredible. They want to establish a new civilian government, democratic, open, and they're requesting compact oversight during their transition." A quiet smile broke across Rourke's tired face. 2 years ago, they vowed to erase us from the stars. "And now," Rhea said softly, "they ask us to help them live free." "That's the fire of liberty," Rourke murmured. "You can't contain it. Once lit, it spreads." At Lunara Station, orbiting Earth's moon, the first interstellar assembly was in full session. No longer a council ruled by dominance. Now every race had equal say. Each voice, no matter how ancient or new, carried the same weight. The chamber buzzed with dozens of tongues. Fluids pulsed in crystalline throats. Sonic bursts cracked the air beside melodic pheromone clouds. Arguments broke out. Debates sparked. And slowly, resolutions emerged. At the center podium stood Ambassador Helen Stride, addressing beings from every corner of known space. Friends, kin, former foes. Today, we don't just mark the end of an empire. We light the path for something greater. Cheers echoed. Chirps. Clangs. Digital pulses. Even the once isolated Kavarii Spirersingers chimed harmonically. Helen raised her hand. "The compact is built on 4 truths. You choose to join. You hold an equal voice. You give as you receive. And if you ever choose to leave, you may. We're not building another throne," she said. "We're building a home." From the edge of the council floor, Maya of the Lumerus, a glowing, crystal-bodied entity, added her resonance. "The humans taught us that true power is not taken. It is offered, and never by force." But even as peace flourished far across space, another moment was rising. Aboard the colossal expeditionary vessel Stellararch, Admiral Lyra Thane ran final diagnostics. Her crew was diverse: human, Zalari, Valari, Drathri. 16 species, 1 mission. "Admiral," said Captain Naira Kalen over comms, all systems green. Final coordinates locked. Thane stepped forward, her hands folded behind her back. "Where are we heading, Captain?" "To the edge," Naira replied. roughly 50,000 light-years past Concord charts. We're diving into the dark. No known systems. No allies. No maps. Lyra smiled. Then carry with you the hopes of all 16 worlds. Show the stars what shared trust can build. Not conquest, but kinship. And with that, the ark leapt into the void, a beacon blazing in the infinite unknown. The star-bound Ardent surged forward, its faster-than-light cores humming with energy not seen since the dawn of the stars. Across dozens of systems, from desert moons to underwater cities, beings of every shape and origin paused to watch the transmission. The ship wasn't just metal and tech. It was an emblem, a symbol of what the Unity Compact now stood for: curiosity, trust, and the courage to face what no species had faced alone before. Among those aboard was Dr. Kayla Mira, the Compact's chief of interspecies medicine. She walked the pristine corridors of the Ardent's Metavault, flanked by Zalari gene weavers, Lumari water surgeons, and even former Concordant scientists who had shed the chains of old hierarchies. "Doctor," said a soft voice beside her. Her aide, a young empathic Threshti named Bloom. "We've calibrated for 23 distinct biological systems. The healing center is fully operational." Kalen stopped for a moment, eyes reflecting the soft lavender lights. "This would have been illegal under the Concord," she said. Species were kept isolated, controlled. Cooperation was seen as rebellion. She smiled. "And yet, in working together, we've created wonders they never dreamed of." Beyond the Ardent's gleaming hull, space opened like a vast story waiting to be written. Back in the former Accord regions, life flourished in ways no conqueror could predict. Where once rigid control reigned, now symphonies echoed between worlds. Trade routes, once strangled by bureaucratic decree, flowed open like living rivers. On the once contested world of Terranessa, now blooming with life, Governor Cora Whitestone prepared for something unimaginable a year ago: the first Harmonic Convergence Festival, celebrating the arts of every member species. The colony that once braced for invasion now lit its streets with laughter and shared language. "Governor," called out Thomas Enkai, a young Terran boy born planetside, "why did the old Accord want to take our home away?" Cora knelt, brushing dust off his sleeve. "Because they believed they owned everything they touched," she said. "But no one owns a place where free hearts choose to stay. Home isn't granted. It's earned and defended." The festival bloomed with beauty. Terrans danced to Zephyri wind harps. Mariner sculptors bent tides into swirling water crests that whispered the stories of ancient Earth. Threshti orators recited verse so moving, even hardened Korthan warriors blinked away tears they didn't understand. And in what was once the Concordant Council Hall, now repurposed into the Museum of Echoes, visitors from every corner of the stars walked its newly lit paths. Here, towering displays told story of what once was: strict caste pyramids, forbidden alliances, silent oppression. Across from them stood holograms of the new world: voluntary unity, shared governance, mutual growth. Leading a group through the museum was Zara Rhine, a young Virexi woman whose species once ruled by fear. But she had grown up in the afterlight. "This is where my kind once decided the fates of others," she told the group. "We believed control was strength, that power meant obedience." A quiet hand rose from the crowd, an elder Terran visitor. His voice trembled, but his words were sharp. "Do you ever miss being in charge?" Zara paused. "In those days," she said, "we weren't leaders. We were prisoners. Even our dominance was a cage." She turned to the group, her eyes steady. "Now we choose. That is the first step of freedom, and the last." Far beyond the rim of explored space, the star-bound Ardent vanished into the void, its engines burning a path where no empire had ever dared go. But this time, the stars wouldn't be met with conquest. They would be met with hope. Commander Kayla Myrex stood at the edge of the observation deck, eyes locked on the impossible. "Commander," said Navitech Oren Valas, his voice trembling, We've intercepted a reading, something massive and not natural. The primary viewport shifted to reveal the silhouette, towering, silent, and ancient. A spaceborne citadel, larger than any planetary moon. Geometry too perfect to be random. Metal that shimmered with energy long after its makers had vanished. Dr. Avon Reese, lead xenoscientist, joined Kayla at the console. No life signs, but the structure's systems are active. Whoever built this, they outpaced us by millions of years. Under the old order, this find would have been seized, claimed by a single species under protocol. But Kayla, captain of the Unity vessel Lucent Path, issued a different command. "We go together," she said. "Every culture represented on this ship has a stake in this. Whatever lies within, we learn it as one, and we share it as one." Across every deck, alien scientists prepped for contact. Aboard that ship were beings who once would have been enemies, now preparing shoulder to shoulder for a discovery that would redefine civilization. Kayla stood at the viewport, remembering the spark that started it all. 2 years ago, Earth had looked at the might of a tyrannical galactic regime and said no. That one word had reshaped the stars. Inside the ancient construct, wonders beyond dreaming were uncovered. Towering chambers of living metal, the sculptures that wept or laughed depending on who beheld them. Tech that repaired flesh with light and memory. A vast hall of mirrored glyphs, where data bloomed into sound, color, and emotion. And deep in the Citadel's core, a message, etched in the language of logic, of stars, of math, universal and eternal. To those who awaken our home, these gifts are yours. May you build a future greater than the one we left behind. Power gained through forced decays. But power shared in harmony endures. Dr. Reese read the final translation aloud, his voice breaking. They're speaking to us from a time before memory. And they're saying we chose right. Back aboard the Lucent Path, Kayla broadcasted to the entire Unity Compact. We have touched the legacy of an ancient civilization. They left behind healing, wisdom, and a single truth. What we build together lasts longer than what we take alone. These gifts are not ours. They belong to all who seek peace. On Earth, President Elias Rourke listened to the transmission in stunned silence. Then tears welled in his eyes. "This," he whispered, "this is what we believed we'd find. Not domination, not empire, but proof that liberty leads to greatness." Soon, the artifacts were shared across the compact. Devices that ended plagues once thought eternal. Instruments that let sentient minds bridge the gaps of species, language, and thought. Emotional symphonies that brought entire worlds to stillness and joy. But the true treasure wasn't technology. It was affirmation. The ancients had walked the path of conquest. It led to ruin, silence, dust. But the path of choice, of freedom, of shared destiny, it had led to this discovery, this unity, this hope. And as the Lucent Path sailed deeper into the stars, the galaxy it left behind began to blossom. Old enemies broke bread. Warring worlds disarmed. Children were raised with a new truth, that no species was lesser and no dream too distant. And it all began when one defiant people refused to bow. They said no to fear. They said no to thrones. They said no to empires born of chains. And in doing so, they gave the universe its most powerful yes, a future built on friendship, a compact that would last not for 1,000 years, but for all the years yet written in starlight. What started with one word, no, has become a movement that reshaped the stars. But the future isn't written yet. And the next chapter? That's yours to choose. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in something greater than power. Subscribe for more tales where courage defies empires and unity rewrites destiny. Because the stars are watching, and they remember who dared to dream.